Ys 9 Monstrum Nox has finally made it over to the US. It starts off with Adol and Dogi trying to get into the prison city of Balduke. As a result, Adol gets arrested and thrown into said prison because he's kinda almost the Vash the Stampede of the Ys universe. But he's not in for long. You quickly find a way to break out of the clink and then run right into the inciting incident. You're stopped by Aprilis, the leader of the Monstrums, and she inducts you into her ranks without your consent. And by induct, I mean she shoots you with a magic flintlock because Ys games are weird like that. Ys 9 plays a lot like Ys 8, with the same party system that the games have used since Ys 7. You have 3 active party members that each have a damage type, and you swap characters on the fly to match the weaknesses of the enemies you're fighting. It's not my preferred Ys engine. I'd like to go back to just Adol, but Ys 9 does what it sets out to do. It's an enjoyable, if not completely bonkers, action RPG. In each chapter, a new member of the Monstrums joins your party. You get to learn a little bit of their backstory, and that person's gift is added to your abilities. Each new gift allows you to traverse some previously locked area in one way or another. One gift lets you run up walls, another lets you glide across gaps, and so on. They're all pretty fun to use, but the wall run can be a little finicky. Too often I found myself running up a wall, only to hit a tiny lip on a roof that prevented me from getting to where I was trying to go, only to try again and immediately get over the lip with no problem. It's not a huge deal, but it happened frequently enough that it started to get old. It's the one mechanic in the game that feels like it needed a little more work. Luckily, you don't have to use it too much because of how handy the fast travel system is. Every section of the map has multiple icons that you can fast travel to, and the load times are only a couple of seconds. Now, I am playing on a PS5, and I'm not sure if you're going to get the same performance on a PS4, but the load times on the PS5 are almost non-existent. Even the dungeons are full of the fast travel panels, most of them right before the boss encounters. Later on, you're given side quests where you're tasked with hunting monsters that have invaded cleared dungeons. I was bummed thinking I'd have to go back through the whole dungeon, avoiding or killing all the low-level enemies until I found the target of the side quest, but no. The enemies are intentionally placed near the warp points, so you can fast travel in, kill them, and warp out. And it's not just with side quests. Ys 9 respects your time from beginning to end. Every occasion in the story where you would have to backtrack or work your way through a portion of a dungeon you've already been through, the game will just teleport you to where you need to go and give a little blurb about how Adol made it through the section with no issues. It's so user-friendly, every game should always do this from this point forward. Really, the only place the game feels padded is in the dialogue. There's a lot of talking. I mean, a lot of talking. Your characters talk about the story, they talk about the quests, they talk about the city, they talk about each other, they talk about themselves, they talk about talking, they talk a lot. Luckily, only about 20% of it is actually voiced. The rest you can speed read and button through as fast as you like. Speaking of voice dialogue, Adol is still a mostly silent protagonist, but he does have small snippets of dialogue about what's happening in the environment. He'll point out consumables and chests as you happen upon them, and will also yell the name of the gift he's using for a traversal, which gets a little old. I heard him yell Crimson Line about 1 billion times over my 45 hours of playtime. And I don't know if it's the voice actor or the direction he was given, but he reminded me of Steve from Code Veronica. It's a nitpick, but Adol Christin shouldn't sound like Steve Burnside. Steve Burnside shouldn't even sound like Steve Burnside. The graphics are about what you'd expect from a late PS4 release. Maybe a little less impressive than other games, but Ys has never been a graphical powerhouse, and the character detail and the various levels texture work are on par with the rest of the series. Although I do think the city of Balduke is far more boring than any of the other environments from the other games. It looks okay, if a little uninspired. Now, Ys games are known for their music, and Ys 9 is a great soundtrack in a series known for great soundtracks. It does a good job running the full spectrum of emotion, from somber music to reflect the poverty of the shantytown area, to full-on double bass thrash metal for the battle music. They even allow for complete silence when it's fitting, and let you soak in the sounds of the environment. Overall, the soundtrack and the sound design are pretty stellar. So most of the game takes place in the city, and it's you searching a borough of the city for the next story point. Every one of the sections of the city is gated off by a barrier. That barrier is dispelled by collecting Nox, shown by the corner in the top left of your screen, and this is going to get complicated, and there are a lot of semi-nonsense terms, but try and stick with me. Your Nox gauge is gradually filled up as you complete side quests or enter into any of the enemy encounters that are strewn across the city. When you gather 100 Nox, you open a miasma vortex. When you enter a miasma vortex, you are sent to the Grimwald Nox, basically a separate dimension that is slowly trying to leak its way into our world. When you're transported here, you will have to kill all of the enemies called Lemiris before they break your big pillar called a Sphene. Do this successfully, the barrier falls, you open a new part of the map, you can continue the story. This repeats every chapter and is your basic macro gameplay loop. The micro gameplay consists of a lot of fighting. To call the battles in Ys 9 fast and frenetic would be quite the understatement. I called it bonkers for a reason. The combat basically descends into utter bedlam the moment more than 2 enemies appear on screen, especially in the Grimwald Nox, because all 6 of the monstrums are there fighting simultaneously. And this really doesn't work in the game's favor because the character control isn't as fluid as I would have liked. I came off of Immortals Phoenix Rising before starting this game, and it left me wanting more from Ys controls. For a series that has become famous for its fast combat, there's a great deal of waiting needed to pull off the defensive moves. You have a flash move and a flash guard that occur when you dodge or guard at just the right moment, but you can't cancel an animation with either of those, meaning you're going to have to stop attacking in order to perform those moves, which just felt kind of clunky and led to me never using them in most of the combat. It's impossible to get the timing down when you're surrounded by enemies, mostly because enemies and their projectiles will clip through one another, so it seemed cheap that I couldn't cancel a sword swinging animation to immediately dodge or block. Every fight I was being hit by an enemy that charged or fired a projectile through the enemy I was focused on, or I was getting hit in the back by something off screen. It left me feeling like I was at a disadvantage that was no fault of my own and that I couldn't overcome. I eventually just started every encounter by spamming my special attacks until everything was dead. And while exploring some of the in-game areas, I just sprinted past most of the enemies. I didn't need the experience in fighting the lower level enemies, wasn't all that engaging. And it's a real bummer because when you're fighting a boss, all of those mechanics work and they feel great. They usually fight you one-on-one, and they have the tells and patterns that allow you to utilize those flash moves. The boss fights are easily the best part of the game. I mean, A+ gameplay. It's one more reason I think they should just go back to Adol in future games and using the same mechanics in smaller encounters. When you're not swinging a sword, you're exploring the city, and there's a lot going on in Balduke. There are landmarks for you to find, azure petals for you to collect, shops to find, recipes to unlock, all of which are tied to their own side quest. And all of that is on top of the normal RPG stuff like upgrading weapons and armor, which honestly felt like it was placed on the back burner. Every chapter you can go to the weapon shop and they'll just have the next step up, available for weapons and armor. You can then upgrade your weapon to a +2 if you have the necessary components, and it works. I usually like to grind out gold and purchase the most powerful weapon the shop has to offer at the beginning, but Ys 9 did a pretty good job of keeping me as powerful as I needed to be for the duration of the game. Now, the best part of the game is the story. Ys 9's story is some of the best RPG writing I've ever experienced. No spoilers here, but the crux of the narrative delves into the nature of what the Grimwald Nox is, what the monstrums are, and how having the power of a monstrum affects everyone in your party. This is not your typical let's get the MacGuffin and save the world JRPG story. The characters are written in such a way that their behavior makes sense, and they react in realistic ways to what's happening. And a lot of credit is due to the team that localized the script. All the character dialogue, especially their banter back and forth, was super endearing. I was actually really impressed. I'd say the biggest achievement of Ys 9 is I cared about my party members, probably the first time since Chrono Trigger. Falcom avoided the usual RPG writing conventions of characters just being archetypes and the plot being so rote that you know exactly what's happening and could write the story in your sleep. I mean, they immediately pair you with an anime cat girl and she doesn't make you want to eat razor blades. That in itself is an achievement. The story and the characters are the reason I recommend that everyone should play Ys 9. After playing for around 45 hours, I didn't want it to end. I wanted to spend more time with everyone and have more adventures with Adol. So if you're a fan of Ys, action RPGs, or want to jump into the Ys series, you should pick up a copy of Ys 9 today.